So thank you so much, Jason, for being here to have a conversation about Shinydocs. I'd love to ask you to start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Melissa. My name is Jason Cassidy. I'm the CEO of Shinydocs Corporation. For about 20 years, myself and our core team were consulting in the areas of enterprise content management. We loved the value that it provided. The idea of data governance and records management across organizations made a lot of sense. But we started Shinydocs not that long ago under the big question of enterprise content management. Why is there no data in there? Why, when we consult with organizations, do they only have 1% of their data in their SharePoint? Why do they only have 1% of their data in their OpenText or IBM systems? And we ended up uncovering that people were asking some of the wrong questions out there. So we started innovating on two fronts. Front number one was trying to increase the usability of these enterprise content management systems. That yielded some great results. We became OpenText Technology Partner of the Year for 3 out of the last 4 years, and we're a top-selling technology partner. But still, moving the needle from 1% to 1.5% isn't that great. So about 3 years ago, we doubled down on other areas of the business, which will probably relate to some of the conversation that we have here today. So all that being said, we're an organization growing rapidly and servicing big companies like think auto manufacturers, nuclear power plants, financial services, big banks. These types of organizations are bringing us in with software and strategy to understand their bigger data problems.
That's really interesting. So I was intrigued. I heard about your company and I was intrigued because a lot of what I hear when I'm talking to organizations about their challenges that they're facing trying to do digital transformation, or sometimes talking about getting ready for AI capabilities, a lot of the sort of challenges that are assumed are around like change management, like a huge change management process and some sort of huge cloud migration process. So when I heard you first speak, and I heard it sounded like you had an approach that was sort of different, and that was not assuming that there had to be a cloud migration that happened to start.
Yeah, when you think about the value proposition of cloud, it was supposed to be that you get this economy of scale, that if you were to buy hardware and your refresh cycles and the energy costs and having humans run these devices, it was supposed to be that you could get cloud for 1/10 of the cost, or maybe 100th of the cost. And the reality is that people are moving to cloud in some limited capacity. But when you start moving larger beyond compute loads into storage loads, you end up paying almost exactly the same amount of money, in some cases more. And I get that you might have less headcount, you're changing capital costs into operational costs, which might be advantageous in some cases. But where was that whole reason that we did in the first place? Because you definitely take a performance hit, especially with new technologies right now. We're working with hardware vendors where you get transfer speeds of 40 gigabytes per second to terabytes per second, depending on your scale and the amount that you want to invest in it, versus cloud, who charges you for every kilobyte that comes out of it, and it comes as slow as your weakest point in your internet connection. And we wonder why did we do that again? And it turns out that we did it because we know that there's some value on the other side. Like Microsoft and SharePoint will give you some artificial intelligence, or Google will give you some artificial intelligence, or you can do that in Azure, and you can't do it on-prem. So therefore, in order to get there and get the value, you need to swallow this giant pill of doing the migration. But the reality is, when we get into our customers, and I'll just show a quick slide here, is that like here's a customer that is medium sized for us. They have the amount of data that we're looking at right here. This is content created by month between around 98 through to a little after 2017. The amount of data in the largest single instances of SharePoint in the world is that amount of data. That's about 100 terabytes. Okay? You don't get many SharePoint instances that are bigger than that. The biggest IBM file nets or OpenText content servers or M files or any of that is about this big. Might be 100, couple hundred terabytes. So what about all this other content here? And what's even more interesting is what about all the workloads associated with this content? From things as simple as my organization with 10,000 employees has 5,000 linked Excel spreadsheets with 3,000 macros that actually run our business. And if you try to move this information, you are destroying my ecosystem. And the people who built those macros in the first place are probably gone from the organization. I'm worried about doing my drafting or my engineering design, or I'm worrying about doing the vibration report for this pump. And you're telling me I have to recreate Excel macros and relink them? No, that's not what I do. So the magnitude of the problem is before you even say I'm going to move all this to the cloud, you got to consider the the inertia and the mass of this content, the utilization of content, whether or not it can be moved, and what's the value in the move in the first place? Because we're not getting the cost savings. There's a convenience factor, but we're not getting those cost savings either. So what we say is you want to disqualify somebody that says you have to destroy your ecosystem first before you move your content into this other location. Only accept vendor solutions that say I'm going to go this, wherever Melissa's working with her strong team. We're going to go to where that data is, understand where the data is, and make it valuable and findable for the organization without disrupting your workflow. And if anybody says you got to make this big move before you're going to get any value from me, from AI or understanding or security, then it's not going to work. And the reality is Gartner and Forrester and others have confirmed that 83% of these big migrations fail to complete. So this is where we are. It's time to think about it differently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And then could you say a little bit about what your approach is? So what do you do that means you don't have to move? You don't have to destroy the ecosystem to get the value?
So there's a couple of different points. And when somebody asks me, okay, who's doing a good job of enterprise content management? I will turn around and ask them, well, what one company is doing a good job of regional and international transportation? That's a hard question. Is it Boeing? Is it Airbus? Is it Ford? I don't know. Like they're all part of a big ecosystem. So who do I think is doing well? I think that the various standards bodies around the world with their records management policies. I do like the security and compliance policies that are coming out right now. They are intended to protect us, no matter how difficult they are to actually implement.
Yep.
There's a standardization that's out there. There is this whole concept of massive innovation in the areas of compute power and data performance that you can't achieve by moving your data someplace else. So maybe that next hardware refresh, you could actually get a 10 to 1,000 times increase in performance if you look at let's look at things like full PCI Express NVMe RAID storage instead of buying cloud storage. You might find that the performance is massive. So I haven't even talked yet about the cool things that we do, because in order to see a long way, you have to stand on the shoulders of giants. And you have to start thinking in a plural way. Think of it more as international transportation. Don't think of it as what bucket am I going to put my data in? So then let's assume that, okay, we're going to consider all of these other techniques. What policies, what legislation need to apply? How are we going to construct the infrastructure to support this? And then what tools do we need to go understand the data? And for us, the tools have existed now for a few years, and we've implemented good versions of artificial intelligence to do automatic content classification. We've implemented the ability to do entity extraction, for example, so we can know which project this document is associated with, or which case it's associated with. We do that wherever the document is. It's that distributed model that was kind of foundational when people invented Hadoop and these types of things, saying, rather than trying to centralize and have one big computer figure everything out, let's distribute the computation. So that's the model that we've used with ours. So it's not one big database. It's a plurality of analytics engines working together to understand where all your duplicates are, what the content is, and then show you, and this is where our software really kicks in, is we've built the dashboards and the visualizations and then the tools to start actioning it to show this is where all your content is clustering together from a content perspective. This is how to answer very specific questions, be able to say, where is Melissa's name being used across the entire network, email outboxes and other content sources, rather than just where is it in SAP, which is where most people, they can only answer that question. We can answer it across that. So, and I apologize that it is a bigger answer, and that's one of the reasons why I think it breaks people's brains. It's because they just want one daddy to come in and tell them what to do. Here, Microsoft, tell me what to do. Oh, and Microsoft's put it over here. It's good for me, and it might be good for you too. Whereas we're saying something of, I can guarantee you 100% attainment of knowledge across all of your data.
Yeah.
But you just have to change the way you're thinking. And oddly enough, this isn't going to cost you any more than the alternative that people have been trying and having that 80% failure rate with, 83% failure rate.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I really appreciate the sort of description of the mindset change from like moving to centralized something to like decentralized computing right at the source, and therefore getting kind of broad coverage of all sorts of sources, data, like all of it is covered in this really decentralized way. And you all have sort of like the dashboards and like the tools that help people kind of move to that new mindset and understand their data that way.
Yeah, and the risk that our organization has is that we don't bind up your data into our source. So we only get paid when you're continuously getting value. We've never lost a big customer because they keep looking and going, I don't want to lose that analytics engine and knowledge of all my data. We never bothered munging up their data and breaking the linked Excel spreadsheets or anything like that. We just go to where the data is, you do you, but just keep knowing where all your content is, and that's why people renew their subscriptions with us.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. Do you have time for one last question?
Yeah, sure.
So I'd heard a framework for thinking about companies or organizations getting to AI, sort of that there's this process that involves digitizing content. An example that was given was like the New York Times digitizing all of their photos. So digitizing, then automating, and then adding intelligence. So I'm curious if you sort of agree with that process, digitization, automation, intelligence, sort of following on each other. And if so, how do you see your company sort of integrating with that or relating to that? Or do you have like a different sense of how that goes?
Yeah, what's always missing in that, it kind of comes down to what I'll call the hammer syndrome, where everything looks like a nail if you're holding a hammer. And obviously in industry, not everything is a nail. There's this intersection of what is possible versus what do people want to do. And a lot of organizations are hiring data scientists. That makes sense. The data scientists don't know how to go and gather all this information from across the organization. So they're stuck in, and I do hear this over and over again, them saying, well, if you gave me better data, I would give you better outcomes. Yeah. So it kind of highlights the idea that maybe we should stop trying to jump to the conclusion, stop trying to jump to the robots that know when the pipe is going to fail, and go back to, let's turn the robots to look at our data and just have the automation understand what the content is, group the content together, try to align it with the asset information, the case information, the policy information first. And I get that that's not the big bang that's going to save you on your repairs or get the case reference to the right person at the right time so that they can do less research. I get that, but it will lead to that. And it is the only thing that will lead to that. If you try to skip the step of understanding what all your data is and using your artificial intelligence and your data mining and understanding techniques, if you just skip that and try to jump to the conclusion of here's how my business is going to succeed with AI, you're going to miss out on 99% of your data. And you're just going to have data scientists going, well, I did the best with what I could.
Yeah.
So I'm saying step back and get people to come in and help those data scientists get the information first.
Yeah.
It's not them that's going to know how to crack open a document and use natural language to pull out this information. It's going to be more somebody like us.
Hmm.
Then
Hmm.
they will know their industry better than we will. They will know how often pipes fail. They'll know exactly the type of information that legal counsel will need to support this case, and let them do their data science with the data.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fascinating that you say that. It's reminding me of a study that I read recently where basically the algorithms were optimizing within this really local data set. But the problem was just so much bigger. And I think as you're saying, like the data that are all brought to bear on these problems are so much bigger than any one sort of local siloed data set. So if your data science is building right there on that local, then the amount of value you can get out of that is just necessarily limited. Whereas I think what you're saying is like if you look and understand the whole data ecosystem, like the potential there is just so much bigger.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's always ignored because it just seems too big. You look at this vast big thing, and organizations, especially the ones that we deal with, who might have been around for 100 years, they will have boxes and boxes of data and microfiche and these other things. And digitization just might mean creating a PDF out of this. Well, that PDF is still lost. If you
Yeah.
can't identify where the hydrostatic tests are that are in there, you can't identify which geography or which geology that applies to, if you can't do that work across the data first,
Hmm.
then you may as well have just left it in the box,
Hmm.
because it's of no use if people are going out and recreating the data anyway. So you need a
Hmm.
good method for understanding that and digitizing it. Then you can hold your hand on your heart and say, yeah, we understand what this is. What's kind of fun about this is when we go across an organization, every time we create a visualization of where their data is and what it is,
Mm.
even though we don't deal with the CIOs necessarily or the CEO or the board, those reports always go to those levels.
I
And
believe
they
it.
always provide feedback saying, wow, we really had this. Wow, we they'll find out things that they didn't know about their own organization. They always underestimate the scope and magnitude of the problem.
Yeah.
So it allows us, even though we can't sell up, we always start by talking to an IT person who has a migration or some type of task to do, and we want to help them a little bit better. And it's hard to just phone the CEO and say, here, care about data. But once we create that first level of understanding, all of a sudden they can't hide from that. They look at that and say, okay, I need to action this, which
Yeah.
allows the expansion.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. This has been really just interesting and helpful. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Melissa. It was a lot of fun.